I know you told your friend you're not okay. And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away, as you fade away.
Yeah, I'm about to fade away, cause every time I wake up I feel like it's Monday. Something's going wrong with all the chemicals up in my brain. All of a sudden I don't look at anything the same way. Got a buildup of my thoughts sitting in an ashtray. I'm sorry that I'm so inconvenient, okay. Just let me be me and I'll stay out of your way. I can see the way you look at me, I'm such a disgrace. I never really asked to be brought into this place. You wanna love me? Well then baby I have a taste. All the highs and the lows, no you'll never be the same. I don't really wanna hurt you but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change I need today. I promise that I've never felt this way. I really hope that you will choose to stay through all the pain.
I know you told your friend you're not okay. And tell me what.
Hey kids, what's up? No. Yeah, there. All right, who's in here? Well, hello, Rev. Hey, Rabbit. Hey, Xadia. Oh, hey, Kim. What's the subject tonight? The subject tonight is these weird ass stories I'm just absolutely loving. Right up my alley. Everyone drank when Nikki says Katie or Rabbit or the. Are you serious? Yeah, we'll be drunk by the end of the street. I said the. Katie, Katie, Bo Beatty, beep bye, Katie. Katie, 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 Katie. Da 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 da. What? I'm trying to get them drunk. Okay, so this first story that I'm going to be reading is it's called The Man Who Wouldn't Die. His name was Michael Malloy. You guys ever heard of him? See if I can find a picture of him. I do have something marked up here. That's him right there. The Man Who Wouldn't Die, the durable Mike Malloy. They actually made a movie about it in 1942. It's called The Man Who Wouldn't Die. Yeah, that's old. So if you're interested, it is on YouTube. The Man Who Wouldn't Die. I'm going to show you a short clip too when I'm done reading it. He is freaky looking. All right, so Michael Malloy. So the USA was in the throes of Prohibition from 1920 to 1933. No alcohol was allowed to be sold or consumed, but that didn't stop some from either selling or drinking it. It was the golden ages of speakeasies, underground bars that allowed unsavory characters to congregate selling questionable liquor. Hey, Teresa. They were also hard times financially. With the Great Depression raging and liquor sales being illegal, times were hard for speakeasy owners like Tony Marino. People would come in, drink, and have no cash to pay with, and he obviously couldn't go to the police. Sorry, that's so funny. He could barely afford his rent and was looking for a way to make some funds. Luckily, his bar was the meeting place for other seedy men looking for quick cash. Oh boy. One night in July 1932, Marino, undertaker Francis Pasqua, and grocer Daniel Kreisberg were in bad spirits while enjoying some illegal ones at Marino's bar. Marino confided in his drinking buddies that business is bad. Pasqua, a career criminal, let the table in on a scam he'd pulled the year before. He said he'd befriended an alcoholic homeless woman, Mabel Carlson, convinced her to declare him as a beneficiary on a $2,000 life insurance policy, almost $44,000 today. Then set about killing her. He'd got her very drunk, drenched her and her mattress in water, then set her and her bed underneath an open window. What? Okay. So we got her very drunk, drenched her and her mattress in water, then set her in her bed underneath an open window. The examiner found she died of bronchial pneumonia. Uh, and Pasqua had walked away with a small fortune, no questions asked, to make her sick. And that's why she got, oh my gosh. Pasqua suggested they pull the same scheme on a local drunk who frequented Marino's place, Michael Malloy. Michael had immigrated from Ireland. He was homeless. He was a homeless alcoholic who had no known family or friends, nor a steady job. He picked up a gig work as a street cleaner, but was more than happy to accept whiskey as a payment. He was a perfect mark for any insurance scam. Froze to death. Some sources say Pasqua got a friend to go with him to several insurance agencies to secure life insurance policies. The friend pretended to be a man called Nicholas Malroy and told the agents he declared his brother Joseph Murphy and at his beneficiary as his beneficiary. In reality, Murphy was a bartender at Marino's bar who was given a cut of the fraud to pretend that the dead Michael Malloy was Nicholas Malroy. The plan was that the murder trust, as the media eventually dubbed them, would kill Michael, then Joseph Murphy would tell the authorities he was his brother, Nicholas Malloy, and he would collect the insurance policies. It took 5 months of meetings, but the men eventually got three life insurance policies, one for $800 from the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company and two each for $495 from Prudential Life Insurance Company. In the end, each man was to receive $30,576, which is the equivalent of around $54,000 today. Nice. You know what? You're probably right. I was thinking that. I'm like, we'll see. Other sources say Michael just drunkenly signed the policies himself, believing them to be petitions to let Marino run for local office. Either way, the men had secured the policies. In December 1932, the murder trust set out to kill Michael Malloy. They assumed it would be an easy job. Michael was such a heavy drinker. They just assumed that they could give him an open tap and he would drink himself to death. He would either succumb to alcohol poisoning, choke on his own vomit, or have an accident and die from his injuries. That's real nice, eh? They gave Michael an open tab, telling him that times were tough, so they had to ease the rules and offer free booze to compete with surrounding speakeasies. Michael took shot after shot, never wavering or tiring of drinking. The open tab plan continued for 3 days until the murder trust started to suspect that maybe Michael couldn't be taken out with simple alcohol. On day 4, he allegedly burst into the bar saying, "Boy, ain't I got a thirst," and continued to drink. The original three men recruited criminals John McNally, Edward Tin Ear Smith, Tough Tony Bastone, and his associate, Joseph Maglione, to help them dispose of Michael. Tough Tony suggested that they just shoot him in the back of the head, and the rest of the men decided they needed the death to look more like accidental to collect on the policy. Bartender Joseph Murphy suggested they replace Michael's usual shots with wood alcohol and other poisonous substances. Wood alcohol is pure methanol. Only 4% wood alcohol would make a person go blind. And since Prohibition, 50,000 people had died from overdoses of the substance, which they thought would work as well as alcohol. Murphy started out giving Michael shots of his usual whiskey to get him feeling good, before switching to wood alcohol. But he showed no signs of being affected by what was essentially poison. Some sources say the men also tried antifreeze, horse liniment, turpentine, and rat poison. It's cutting out. Oh man. Michael continued coming into the bar for days, asking for shot after shot of one of the poisons the men were offering him. He didn't waver for days until he stood and collapsed to the floor. His breath and pulse were both weak. The murder trust waited for Michael to go pass away. They heard a sharp intake of breath they assumed to be his last, but then he started snoring. He had simply fallen asleep. The men had noticed that Michael was a fan of seafood and thought if they soaked oysters and denatured alcohol and served it to him, he would experience serious gastrointestinal issues that would kill him. Instead, he ate the oysters and washed them down with wood alcohol, seeming to enjoy every bite. Oh my God, you guys. In the same vein, they tried to feed him a sandwich of rotten sardines mixed with shards of metal and tacks. What? Michael ate the sandwich again with his glass of poison and asked for another. I always thought oysters are gross. Just to look at, ugh, no, I'm good. With the number of people, the original planners had to cut in, plus the alcohol costs and the monthly fees for the three life insurance policies, the plan was getting way too expensive. The trust decided to do what Pasqua had done to Mabel, Carlson, and freeze Michael to death. After getting him drunk on the various poisons they'd already tried, they drove him from Marina's place to Crotona Park, took his shirt off, and doused his head and torso in water before leaving him for dead in the New York winter. The next day, Marina went back to his bar and found Michael in the basement, dressed in a new outfit and complaining of a weed chill. Sorry, that's funny. Hey, April. Complained of a weed chill. Oh my God. Apparently, law enforcement had come by moments after the men had left him there and had taken him to the shelter where they gave him dry clothes. He went to the shelter. The police picked him up, brought him to the shelter, and they gave him dry clothes. The trust then brought in yet another conspirator, cab driver Harry Green, who they promised $150 of the insurance cut if he would run Michael over with his taxi. Wow. Once again, the men got Michael drunk and took him for a ride. Two of the trust propped him up while Harry spat at them. The two sober men were meant to jump out of the way and let Harry hit and kill the drunken Michael. He ended up also dodging the cab twice. Wow. On the third attempt, they were trying for a third time. He was actually Harry or Michael was actually hit, and the men fled the scene assuming he was finally dead. What year is this? This is in what? 1933, during the Prohibition with the speakeasies. So for the third time, he was hit, and they're assuming he was dead, so that's the scene. Joseph Murphy, the bartender, meant to be the brother of the deceased man the murder trust had taken out a policy on, called around to hospitals and morgues looking for his brother. There's no information on a fatal car accident. 5 days after they had run over Michael with no information about where he'd gone, the men were looking into finding another homeless man to pass off as Nicholas Melroy so they could collect the insurance payouts. Before they could finalize the plan, Michael Malloy walked through the door saying, "I sure am dying for a drink." Wow. Michael had very few memories of the night and certainly didn't know that the men were trying to kill him. He had simply woken up in Fordham Hospital and desperately wanted to get back to the bar. February 21st, 1933, 7 months after the seemingly simple plan had been hatched, the murder trust had had enough of waiting. They rented a room in a nearby tenement with gas lighting, and after getting Michael drunk again, they affixed a rubber tube from the gas fixture to his mouth and gassed him to death. A corrupt doctor, friends of Pasqua's Dr. Frank Manzella, created a fake death certificate claiming the man died of pneumonia. The men collected the $800 policy for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, but couldn't get the two policies from the Prudential. They needed to produce a body for Prudential to sign off. Pasqua said they'd already buried the body. Some sources say investigators Murphy, who claimed to be the deceased brother, and found it suspicious that he was in jail at the time. Michael Malloy's incredible tale was circulating the city, and eventually cab driver Harry Green and the corrupt Dr. Manzella confessed their part in the crime. In May 1933, Michael was exhumed from his resting place in Pauper's Field in Westchester's County's Fir Cliff Cemetery. His cause of death was confirmed, and Pasqua, Marino, Christ, and Murphy were all convicted of first-degree murder and put to death by electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. Wow. The cat came back. Yeah, they would see he's a witch. You are distracting me. F off. All right, I'm gonna show you something. A clip. I think it's like 6 minutes. Yes. 619. So this is about the man who wouldn't die. And this is Disasterthon True Horror. That's what it's called. So this was done 2 years ago. So I'd like to give them absolute credit for this video that I will be playing. Sorry, it's low.
The life of Mike Malloy is pretty much unknown to everyone. The way Mike died, however, is a completely different story that has become infamous over the years due to the way Mike managed to cheat death for months before finally succumbing to his fate. Michael Malloy was an Irish immigrant who settled in the United States. During the 1920s and the 1930s, he was a homeless man who lived on the mean streets of New York. The former firefighter had hit a rough patch and had grown a dependency on alcohol, like many did during this era. During this time, he began to frequent local speakeasies. A speakeasy is an illegal tavern selling alcoholic
It's just crazy though how he really died. All of them got him drunk and like gassed him to death.
drinks. During the Prohibition era in the United States, the number of speakeasies reached an all-time high. These bars were normally run by criminals. With World War I over and the country in good spirits, the demand for liquor
What do you guys think of when you hear speakeasies? Automatically go to Al Capone and like Bugsy every time.
swiftly increased, and a new culture arose for individuals who saw an opportunity to profit. This meant hundreds of bootleggers, illegal alcohol smugglers, and speakeasies sprung up. There were thought to be 100,000 speakeasies in New York alone. While attending one such venue, owned by a shady entrepreneur named Tony Marino, Malloy would find a place where he felt comfortable to drink, and it would become his local. Marino quickly learned that Malloy was completely dependent on alcohol and had no job, friends, or family.
You're an idiot. I'm punchy as fuck. What the fuck is that?
Knowing this, Marino devised a scheme to murder and exploit the Irishman for financial gain. Marino and his 4 criminal friends, Joe Murphy, Frank
You think that too, Capone, right? Where I live is where they'd send mobsters to cool off during Prohibition. Really? If the heat was getting on a mobster, they'd end up around my area. That is cool. You know that Capone? I found this out recently. He actually has a hideout in Canada. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. We get to look at that. I think of The Shining for a speakeasy. I'll automatically go to Al Capone and Bugsy. Then that makes me think like Black Dahlia. Yeah, Capone was up there. One of his hideouts was in Canada. I did see that. It was pretty cool. I was like, and in Canada, in Ottawa, actually, we have got an Al Capone's bar. So that was pretty cool. I was on the property that once he stayed at. Oh, that is so neat. Those pictures are pretty neat too. I love history. There was one, yeah, just the one. You guys had a couple up there.
Pasqua, Dan Kreisberg, and tough Tony Bastone planned to take out several life insurance policies on Malloy, then make sure he died of natural causes so they could claim the money and split the profits. Now, this sounds crazy. However, Marino had gotten away with this before. He purchased an insurance policy for a homeless woman, listing himself as the beneficiary. He forced her to drink alcohol, stripped her naked, and then soaked her mattress in icy water and opened the window. She died the next day, and he claimed $2,000 and had gotten away with it easily. It wasn't difficult to trick Malloy into signing it off, and they did when he was drunk, with the help and promise of free alcohol. For their first idea, they decided to spike his drink with antifreeze and give him shots of blood alcohol. Malloy would continue to drink what the men gave him and ask for more. He had cheated death for the first time, and his incredible story had just begun. The gang of thugs weren't deterred. The next night, the group drove Malloy to a local park after a heavy drinking session, where they doused him in water and left him on a park bench to freeze to death. To their shock, Malloy joined them at the speakeasy the next day, claiming he needed a drink because he had caught a cold. After failing again, they began to spike his food.
What is that? Dr. Salisbury's rat death? Kills mats, mice, and gophers. What the hell is in the powdered red squills? Wheat, oil of anise, and wheat meddlings from Salisbury's laboratories. Rat death. Okay.
with methanol and rat poison. Malloy, again, would simply ask for more. At this point, the group grew frustrated. They had no idea how he kept cheating death time and time again, but time and time again, he did. This time,
Rabbit. I knew something told me your mouth was going to say something. That. He also hid in Arkansas and Hot Springs. That's awesome. Yeah, me too. I used to hate history. Hated it. Apparently, I didn't understand it. Now, yeah, I love it. I love the stories about Capone. The dude was cool as fuck. Well, I have to agree. I would say Bubsy's worse, just because he killed a Black Dahlia. I would eat that. Who says that? You. Of course, you. You're
they
just a
hired
rabbit.
cabbie Hershey Green to run over Malloy as they filled him with booze. They brought him to a lonely street, propped him up, and then drove over him with a taxi, leaving him to die of his injuries. But Malloy didn't die. Malloy entered the speakeasy a few weeks later after being discharged from hospital, claiming, "I almost nearly died in hospital," and then asked for a drink. The gang of criminals had finally had enough. They had no idea how Malloy kept cheating death over and over again. The killers took Malloy to Murphy's room on February the 23rd,
How old that is. Wow.
1933, after he had passed out during a night of drinking, and inserted a hose into his mouth that was attached to the coal gas jet and switched it on. Malloy was
That's
finally
sick.
killed as a result of this and died within an hour. Malloy's death was announced, and the organization received funds from the life insurance plan. They had finally done it. But this isn't the end of the story. When Tony Bastone openly grumbled about his part of the cut, the gang got into a heated argument. Tony was then shot outside the speakeasy as a result of the altercation.
I didn't know that. I didn't read that. Tony, who was that? That was I think that was the gas or the gas. I think that was the taxi driver, wasn't it? They said one of them snitched. It was the doctor. Okay, Harry Green was the one. Well, who the hell was Tony? Who was Tony? I forget who Tony was. Joseph Murphy was the bartender. Who's Tony? Does anybody remember Tony? I don't see no Tony. Oh, there's a Tony. Tough Tony, that's what his name was. Okay. He was one of the mobsters.
A witness had saw this, which had led to the arrest, which had led to Speakeasy as a result of the altercation. A witness had saw this, which had led to the arrest of Murphy. Because of the shootout, police were led right to Marino Speakeasy. Rumours began spreading like wildfire, and whilst in custody, the man told investigators about Mike Malloy and what the group had done to him. At first, the police didn't believe him, but after they examined Malloy's body, they were shocked.
So this is the body of Michael Malloy as it's hard to read. Oh, this is his body after it was exhumed. Scared the shit out of me.
To find out the truth. The other men were quickly arrested, and once in custody, began to turn on each other. With the exception of Hershey Green, the taxi driver, who was sentenced to life in prison, all of the members of the now dubbed Murder Trust were executed by electric chair in 1934. The doctor that they hired to sign off the death certificate was also arrested. Although there is no happy ending to this story, the legend of his death will forever live on. Malloy was buried in Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York.
Yeah, and he's got a movie about him now. But did Malloy come back? No, he did not come back. Oh, no worries. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, on to the next story. This one I do know about. This one's about LaPlante. What was his name? Daniel? Yeah, Daniel LaPlante. So I don't know if you guys ever heard this story before, but this is about a guy. He's completely creepy and disgusting. And he was in living in a family's home in the damn walls. And the family was a four-person family home. and it was a mother, father, and 2 daughters. Well, the mother actually, I believe, passed away from cancer. I think that's what she passed away from. So the girls decided they were young, and they decided that they were going to use a Ouija board and try to talk to her. Well, after that, they started hearing banging on the walls. There was knocking, answering their questions. There was ketchup written somewhere in the I think the kitchen. Stuff would be missing, and it scared the shit out of them. So they thought it was their mother, but then it got creepy and creepy and creepy. They realized it wasn't their mom. They thought it was another ghost. They had no idea this little bastard was living in their walls. Do you mind? Stop. You can't lay on the laptop this time, honey. Kitty butt. What's here? You're right. No, you're mad. Okay, you guys stop touching. I read this girl. Sorry, I meant to show what the heck he looks like. What the hell is this? Maybe that's why you never got sick when you're an alcoholic. All right, so this guy's name was Daniel LaPlante, and they call this the ghost in the walls. So in 1986, in the small Massachusetts town of Pepperell, 15-year-old Tina Bowen and her 9-year-old sister, Karen, gathered around a Ouija board. The two young girls tried to contact their mother, who had died the year before from cancer. The girls got nothing from the Ouija session, but it still started a chain of events that would change their lives forever and lead to the three exceedingly horrific deaths. Yeah, they ended up killing 2 people. You can't lay on that, Claire. So the night of their seance, the girls heard knocking on their walls, but they tried to sleep, thinking maybe contacting the spirits had worked and their mother was trying to communicate with them. They asked the entity questions and got replies and more knocks and scratches on the walls. Had the girls actually managed to bring a spirit into their home? Over the next few weeks, the knockings got more aggressive. Sorry. And frequent. It began to disturb their sleep and deeply upset them. Their father, Frank, assumed the girls were just stressed from grief and were hearing things. However, the unexplainable haunting soon became more intrusive. Unattended beverages would disappear from drinking glasses. Objects moved around the home, and the TV would change channels on its own. Yeah, she's bugging me. She wants to be pet. She wants her food, her wet food. Oh, you've heard it? It's such a good story, but it's crazy. It is crazy. It's more than bizarre. Yeah, she's always touched me. So the TV would change channels on its own. Even the furniture would be moved from one side of the room to the other. Now, if that was me at, what was it, 12 and 9 years old? Sorry, 15 years old even, and a 9-year-old, I would be scared shitless. The knocking continued to get stronger. It started in the girls' room, but eventually made its way all over the house. One day, while the girls were sitting in the living room, they heard the knocking coming from underneath them. Terrified, but needing answers, they took a kitchen knife and descended to the stairs to the cellar. Just don't touch it. Are we good? No touchy? You'll turn it off. Shit. Come on, small spot. Okay, so they were terrified, but they needed answers, so they took a kitchen knife and descended to the stairs to the cellar. There, they found a note written in red on the wall saying, "I'm in your room. Come and find me." I'd shit. That's it. I would shit. Yeah. Frank continued to be a skeptic, and that is their father. He assumed one of them had written the note on the wall, acting out because of extreme grief. He sent the girls to go to counseling. On December 8th, 1986, the family returned home from an outing with the girl's friend Karen. They noticed that the toilet had been used but not flushed while they were gone. Frank went around the house investigating. He went into his room and noticed something off about his wardrobe. When he opened it, he was met with a crazed figure crouching down wearing a hairy jacket. His face was painted, his hair was greasy and unkempt, and he was carrying a hatchet in one hand and a wrench in the other. Some sources have said the intruder was dressed in a wig and an old dress of Frank's deceased wife. But while that does make for a sensational story, it's not true. That's what I seen. Where did I see this story? I can't remember now, but that's what I saw. Exactly. That would freak me out also because I with my sister in the winter times because my sister and my dad worked at the state of highway and snowed. He had to work until midnight. Yeah. The figure calmly ordered the three girls and Frank into the bedroom, where he menaced them with his weapons. Luckily, Tina was able to get away. She ran to their next door neighbor's house and called the police. The man had disappeared by the time the authorities arrived. The family was shaken up and still very unsettled, as it sank in that perhaps the disturbances they had been experiencing for the better part of a year had not been a ghost, but a person living in their walls, intentionally, psychologically torturing them. That's sick. The Bowens stayed somewhere else while police investigated, understandably too scared to go back to the house while the culprit had not been found. 2 days after the incident, Frank returned to the house to pick up a few things for the girls. As he approached the home, he noticed movement in front of a window. He looked closer and saw the face of the man staring back at him. Frank called the police and told them that the man was still in their home. When the authorities arrived, they searched the home but couldn't find a person anywhere. What they find were two family pictures that had been stabbed with kitchen knives and two horrifying messages written on the walls. One said, "I'm still here, come find me," while the other plainly stated, "I am going to kill you." But where had the perpetrator gone? Obviously, he had been living in the home for a while before taking the family hostage. And Frank had just seen him in the front of the window. The authorities didn't see any footprints in the snow leading away from the home. He had to be hiding somewhere that the police hadn't yet searched. Eventually, the police found a tiny crawl space in the bathroom wall that housed the plumbing. To get to it, you would have to hoist yourself up over a 4-foot foundation wall, squeeze through an 8 to 9 inch wide opening, and drop into the space. It provided just enough room for someone to crouch down. The space also connected to the cellar floor below. An officer wriggled in, a gun drawn, jumped down. He saw nothing but what he thought was a pile of clothes until he realized it was, in fact, a hiding person. Officer Stephen Bedzinson noted how eerily calm the intruder was. Even when he threatened to shoot him, he said he wasn't afraid to have a gun stuck next to his head. The person who had been terrorizing the Bowens was arrested and taken into custody, where it was discovered that he was someone who had once been on a date with Tina, the 17-year-old. Daniel LaPlante. That was her. Oh my God. Daniel LaPlante was born May 15th, 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts. According to Daniel, he endured horrific physical and essay at the hands of his father for most of his childhood. He acted out in school and didn't have many friends. He was sent to a psychiatrist and diagnosed with a hyperactive disorder. Daniel claimed his doctor also essayed him. By the time he was 15, Daniel was already a seasoned home invader and a burglar. He didn't only want to steal things, though, he also wanted to terrorize the people living in the houses he broke into. He enjoyed playing mind games and would move objects around or leave items behind so the owners would know someone had been inside. There are two different stories about how Tina and Daniel met. One says that in 1986, Daniel somehow got his hands on the Bowens phone number. Some say he had broken into their house and previously and managed to collect it, but this is unconfirmed. Either way, he began calling the house, telling Tina that he had gotten her number from a friend at her school, and he thought she was really pretty. He described himself as blonde, tall, and athletic, the total opposite of what he actually looked like. The two struck up a friendship, and eventually Tina agreed to date with him. When he met up the door, she realized that he was not as he had described himself. She was unsettled by the lie and by Daniel's disheveled, greasy appearance. Tina agreed to go to the fair with him anyway, but it just got worse. Tina confided in Daniel that her mother had recently passed. Instead of having sympathy for her, he asked her for details about how much her mother had suffered and how she felt when she found out she was dead. Tina made an excuse to leave about an hour into the date. Tina was not at all interested in seeing Daniel again. The rejection seemed to make him even more obsessed with her, and he proceeded to move into her family home for the better part of a year, a whole damn year. Wow. The other story doesn't explain how the two met, but says that they went on one date before Tina's friends informed her that Daniel was facing our allegations and she should probably stay away from him. Regardless of how things went down, the two had a very brief dalliance, and Tina was not interested in pursuing things further. Once the officers found Daniel in the family home, he was arrested and taken to juvenile detention center where he stayed until October 87. He was 1987. He was then sent to an adult facility where his mother was able to post his $10,000 bail. He was released to his mother and stepfather's custody to await his trial on December 11th. Almost immediately after being released, Daniel started breaking into houses again. He burglarized a home that was just a quarter mile from his mother's house in broad daylight, and on October 14th, stealing cash and two guns. That's not creepy. Daniel's family started noticing that he had a lot of cash for someone who didn't have a job and was supposed to just be staying home awaiting a trial. His mother found one of the guns he had stolen, and he lied and said he had had it before he was even arrested. On November 16th, 1987, Daniel broke into the Gustafson house, which was just through the woods to the back of his own house. He took a cordless phone, cable boxes, and the remotes that went with them. What he intended to do with these items is unknown. Could he have been planning another haunting? Reports say that Daniel asked his brother and his brother's friend for bullets that would fit the gun he stole. He somehow convinced them that he just wanted to perform an experiment where he melted the bullets down and reformed the metal into something else. It's uncertain whether the brothers actually believed this, considering Daniel's strange criminal past, but he gave him the bullets anyway. That's not very good. On December 1st, 1987, Daniel once again broke into the Gustafson home. He claimed he was not expecting anyone to be home to interrupt his usual trawling around and moving items to scare the occupants. However, nursery school teacher Priscilla Gustafson and her 5-year-old son, William, came home while Daniel was in the house. Oh. He shoved William in a closet, made makeshift restraints from stockings and other clothing, tied Priscilla up, arred her, placed a pillow on her head, and shot her. Daniel then took William to the bathroom and drowned him in the tub. Wow. I forgot about that for some reason. Probably because it's bad. I completely forgot about the murders. Oh my God. He then left the home and attended his niece's birthday party. That's sick. Andrew Gustafson came home to an eerily quiet house. Normally, his two young children would be running around, playing and making noise, but they were nowhere to be seen or heard. He walked into his bedroom to find his wife tied up and shot. He immediately called the police, but he said he was too afraid to look for his children as they continued silence was not a good sign. Oh my God, that's heartbreaking. The authorities found footprints matching a size 11 or 12 Converse shoe in the flower beds outside the home and saw that a few items were missing, including the metal Gustafson nameplate for the front of the house. On December 2nd, police found the nameplate in the woods along with a flannel shirt and a pair of work gloves that later turned out to have gunshot residue on them. The police dogs led officers right to Daniel's home, but not before Daniel fled. A search of the home found the rest of the items that had been stolen from the Gustafson's home and the gun used to kill Priscilla. A manhunt ensued. Daniel spent the next day desperately breaking into houses looking for supplies so he could stay hidden as far as possible. However, the search didn't last long. Police found Daniel hiding in a dumpster on December 3rd. In 1988, Daniel was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and was sentenced to 3 life sentences. In 2017, Daniel appealed for a reduced sentence, but the judge said he was clearly not regretful of his hideous crimes and upheld 3 life sentences. Daniel will not even potentially be eligible for parole until he has served 45 years. Wow. I'm gonna read one more, I think. Yeah, we can do one more. I'm just gonna show this video here. So this is called The Disturbing Case of Daniel LaPlante. This one's 13 minutes. I just gotta make sure I have it sped up a bit. Okay.
Hello. We shall be. He had a
Oops, sorry.
1970 at the life of Daniel LaPlante.
I thought it was a video. I didn't realize it was
Daniel
a
was born on the 16th of May, 1970,
podcast.
in Middlesex County, Massachusetts. He had a difficult upbringing, living with his mother, stepfather, and brothers, Stephen and Matthew.
So he was what? 17, they said?
Their home was overrun with stray animals and junk, and neighbours tended to avoid the family. It is believed that Daniel was abused throughout his early life. Unsurprisingly, he struggled in school, and this was complicated further by the fact that he suffered from dyslexia. Daniel found it difficult to make friends and was very much a loner. When he reached his teenage years, his lack of hygiene, along with some strange behavioural tendencies, led to him being referred to a psychiatrist for treatment. At some point during his youth, he was also believed to have been abused by a mental health professional. Neighbours described Daniel as being scary and strange.
So that sound okay. So I did read that part. Shit. So is that true then? Not only what was it, stepfather, but his doctor, his psychiatrist too. I mean, no matter like, no wonder he was messed up. And what sucks, and I don't like, and I'm different. I'm opposite. Like, I think everybody's had something shitty happen to them in their life, and there's two things that can happen when you are essayed and art and stuff like that. Either you become the perpetrator, like I'm assuming, well, like I know he did, or you just stay a victim for life. I don't know how you can do that to someone after it's done to you. That I will never fucking understand.
And it wasn't long before Daniel embraced a life of crime. He would break into people's homes, sometimes to steal their possessions, but on other occasions, he would just move items around in the house to unsettle the occupants, as they would soon realise that someone had been in and out of their home. At the age of 16, Daniel obtained the phone number of a local girl by the name of Annie Andrews. Annie was 15 years old and lived with her father, Brian. She also had a younger sister called Jessica. Annie's mother had recently passed away after a long battle with cancer, which obviously left the family vulnerable and distraught. Daniel and Annie soon struck up a telephone friendship, during which time Daniel described himself to Annie and told her how he went to a nearby high school where he was captain of the football team. After several of these phone calls, Annie agreed to go on a date with Daniel. When he arrived to collect her, she was disappointed to see that he didn't really look anything like the person he had
Is it better
described.
with me muted?
However,
There's
the
no
two
echo?
still went out to get ice cream, and during their time together, Daniel took an unusual interest in the details of Annie's mother's death. Annie found the whole experience uncomfortable and was relieved to return home knowing that there would never be a second date. Annie's father was working hard trying to provide for the family, as well as dealing with the grief of losing his wife and helping his daughters with the loss of their mother. He would often work long hours, during which time the girls were in the house alone. In the autumn of 1986, Annie and Jessica started to hear strange noises in their home. They told their dad, who dismissed these noises as the usual creaks that occur in houses. The noises, however, never seemed to occur when Brian was in the house. One evening, they found writing on the basement wall and panicked. They called their father, begging him to return home as soon as possible. When Brian returned, he checked the house to see what was going on. As he walked into Annie's room, he was horrified by what he saw. There was a man wearing a wig and one of Brian's late wife's dresses, and he was standing in the middle of the room wielding a small axe. Brian ran out of the house and called the police. When the police arrived, it seemed that the man had escaped. However, an officer noticed hidden access to a crawl space under the stairs. As the police looked inside, they found Daniel.
Our real enemy is time.
LaPlante hiding. They also found food debris, clothing, and wrappers, and it was determined.
The echo's gone then when I'm muting. Okay. I figured. That is just creepy as it is. I've actually seen videos where they thought it was a ghost and they would assume it was a ghost. And sure enough, it was like somebody living in their attic or something. Like there's a video that's I think it was on Nuke's Top 5 or Slapped Ham or something. And there was a lady, she was so tiny and frail, and she was like living up in their attic, and she would drop down on the counter, grab whatever she needed and go right back up, and nobody was the wiser. But the man, it was a guy that lived alone, and he ended up putting up a camera and he caught her. No, I don't have an ad blocker.
That Daniel had been living within the crawl space and void between the walls of the Andrews family home for around 2 months. He had been watching the family go about their daily routines, and whenever Brian was out at work, had tormented the two young girls by moving things, flickering the lights, and making noises. Daniel was arrested and on December 11th, 1986, was charged with several offences, including breaking and entering and armed assault in a dwelling. As he was 16 at the time, he was initially placed into a juvenile facility. But when it was determined that he was to be tried as an adult, he was eligible for bail. Daniel immediately returned to his illegal ways.
I
Again, he
agree,
started
Teresa.
breaking into people's houses, often stealing worthless items purely to unsettle the residents. However, during one burglary, he stole 2 handguns from a neighbour's house. On November the 16th, 1987, there was a break-in at the home of Priscilla and Andrew Gustafson. 33-year-old Priscilla and 34-year-old Andrew had lived at their house in a secluded spot on Saunders Road in Townsend for 5 years. The couple had 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and William, who was 5. They had recently discovered that they were expecting.
I could be wrong, but the only thing I know about what he did is he did murder the wife and art her, and then the little boy by drowning him in the bathtub. What happened to Priscilla then? Or did I just completely block that out or something? Or I just didn't read it right? I have no idea, but I don't remember Priscilla. Or Abigail, sorry. Priscilla was the wife, Abigail was the daughter. I don't even remember that.
Their 3rd child. Andrew worked nearby in a small law firm, and Priscilla was a teacher at the Townsend Cooperative Play School. Priscilla and Andrew reported the break-in to the police. The police had been receiving an increasing number of these reports over the preceding months. It appeared that several items had been moved around and a few items that had been stolen, but nothing of any significant value. On December the 1st, 1987, Priscilla picked William up from the babysitters at 1 p.m. before returning home. At 3:30 p.m., Abigail returned home on the school bus. Andrew was working on a major real estate deal for his firm and was excited when it had all been finalised that afternoon. He phoned Priscilla in the hope that she would be able to arrange a babysitter so the two of them could go out and celebrate that evening. However, Priscilla did not answer the phone. After trying to phone a couple more
Okay, my bad. I did read it. He tied the mother up and did what he did to her. He then took the 5-year-old, which was Daniel, drowned him in the bathroom tub. Then the 7-year-old Abigail, daughter, she came home and he did the same with her in the tub. Right? Ghosties only need splashes of holy water. Truers are a mess to clean up. Yeah.
times, but without success. Andrew made the short drive home, where he saw Priscilla's car on their driveway. He entered the house at around 5:30 p.m. and found it to be unusually quiet. Andrew went upstairs, where he discovered Priscilla's body lying on the bed. Her head had been covered with a pillow, and she had clearly been shot. Andrew immediately called the police, but was paralysed with fear and unable to go and look for his children. When the police arrived, they escorted him from the house before searching the property. William's body was found in an upstairs bathroom. He had been drowned. Abigail's body was found downstairs. She had been beaten and drowned. A massive police hunt was soon
Okay, they didn't say that in the book. So she was not only drowned, she was beaten. Oh my God.
underway. This quiet community was shocked that there was a triple murderer on the loose. The police noted that a message had been scrawled on the wall, and the similarity between this and the previous crime scene at the Andrews house could not be ignored. The following day, December 2nd, 1987, Daniel was questioned in relation to the murders, and whilst the police believed that he was involved, they did not have enough evidence to press charges. The police continued to build a case against Daniel. The Gustafsons' home was less than a mile from where Daniel lived. The two houses were separated by woodland. When this woodland area was searched, the police found a shirt, gloves, and a family nameplate taken from the Gustafsons' home. These all linked Daniel to the murders. Returning to arrest Daniel, the police found that he had disappeared.
He does look like a damn, like, creep, right? He freaks me out. He freaks me out.
Warrant was issued for Daniel's arrest, and a massive police hunt followed. He was described as approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing around 135 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. It was also noted that Daniel was potentially armed and considered extremely dangerous. At around 6:30 p.m. on 3rd of December, Daniel was found hiding in a dumpster in a lumber yard in Ayr. That's A-Y-E-R. This was about 10
Holy shit, he's big. Look how big he is compared to the cops. Wow. That's a big boy.
miles from the scene of the crime. Some reports have stated that he was laughing when he was arrested. With further investigation, it revealed more forensic evidence. A hair belonging to Abigail was found on Daniel's clothing, and bullet casings were found at Daniel's home, which were an exact match to the bullets that killed Priscilla. Daniel was charged with 3 counts of murder. He protested his innocence, claiming that he was at home watching music videos at the time of the murder. His alibi could not be verified. After assessing his competency to stand trial, jury selection began on 3rd of October the following year. Daniel pleaded not guilty. The prosecutors presented over 50 witnesses and a variety of forensic evidence. The defense did not call a single witness, stating that all
Yeah, he's
evidence against
tall.
Daniel was circumstantial. They said that whilst the evidence suggested that he could be the killer, it in no way conclusively proved that he was. The defense team further argued that the evidence led to the LaPlante family as a whole, and not specifically Daniel, suggesting that Daniel was being used as a scapegoat. On 25th of October 1988, Daniel was found.
Yeah, he's very tall. Like, how the heck did he hide in someone's house? I don't know, because he was in between the. I'm gonna show you the map after this. I still don't understand it. You're a Sasquatch.
Guilty of all 3 murders. The following day, he was given 3 life sentences. The prosecution asked for these sentences to be consecutive, while the defense team requested that they run concurrently. The judge agreed with the prosecution, and Daniel would therefore have to serve 3 consecutive 15-year sentences before being eligible for parole. Almost 30 years later, on 22nd of March 2017, a resentencing hearing took place in Middlesex Superior Court, Massachusetts. Daniel requested a reduction in his sentence on the basis of him being a juvenile at the time of the crime and the law regarding the maximum.
That doesn't even look like him. We can pull it up pretty well. Yeah, Tracy, you're obsessed. We're gonna have to do a Sasquatch stream too.
Term that a juvenile could be incarcerated for without consideration of parole being reduced to 30 years in 2014. However, this was not a retroactive law, so did not apply to Daniel's conviction. Despite stating that he was sorry for his crimes and remorseful of the lives which he had taken, a forensic psychiatrist evaluated Daniel and diagnosed him with having antisocial personality disorder, and noted that Daniel showed a complete lack of empathy for his crimes. At this 2017 review, the judge again gave him the maximum penalty of 45 years before he would be eligible for parole. 2 years later, in 2019, Daniel launched an appeal on the basis that his sentence was unconstitutional because he was being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. If this appeal was successful, he would be considered for parole within 2 years. However, on Thursday, June the 6th, 2019, the Supreme Judicial Court unanimously ruled that Daniel must serve the entire 45-year sentence before being eligible for parole. This will be in the year 2032, when he will be 62 years old.
Now that is justice, if you ask me. I'm taken, my dear friend. All right, I'm gonna show you what they drew of this map. So that's it. So it says up here that this is 4 feet, 4 feet. Here's the toilet, a wall. It says there's open space at ground level. LaPlante's secret hiding place is in here. So there's a big open space. Inner wall, here's the concrete foundation, outer wall. This is supposed to be the top view. Entry made by climbing up onto a 4-foot high foundation and jumping down to the open space. So it's a triangle. That is creepy. Oh my God. Lumpy. Okay, so this next case, I don't I don't think I've heard of it. I'll probably figure it out once I start reading. So this one is about Kevin Ives and Don Henry, the boys on the tracks. You guys ever heard of this story? So on August 23rd, 1987, about 4 a.m., train engineer Stephen Schroyer was on his regular route through Saline County, Arkansas. When the 75-car freight train reached the outskirts of Bryant, Arkansas, he saw something that would change his life forever. Stephen noticed two figures on the tracks, partially covered by light green tarp. He was alarmed, but expected the figures to move out of the way, or at least to look up. The engineer began the braking process for the train, but a 6,000-ton train traveling at 50 miles per hour can't just stop on a dime. I know, I see it, him and his saxophone. Half a mile later, the train finally came to a stop, but not before it had run over the lifeless bodies laid across the tracks. Shore and his colleagues called the authorities, noting that was a .22 rifle and a flashlight on the gravel near the bodies. At about 5 a.m., Linda Ives, a Bryant resident, got a call from family friend Curtis Henry, asking if she knew where their sons were. Linda was a little perturbed by the question, considering her son Kevin was supposed to be spending the night at Henry's house with Curtis's son Don. It is funny. That squatch. Curtis informed Linda that the boys had left the house at around 12:15 a.m., planning to go spotlighting, an illegal form of hunting where you shine a flashlight in the eyes of an animal to stun it and make it easier to shoot. The boys were also going to meet up with several friends throughout the night, one who wanted to come hunting with them, and a few they'd meet up in a grocery store parking lot to hang out and smoke pot. Curtis called Linda back a little while later morning with the horrific news that their sons had been shot. Oh my God, tied to the train tracks and run over. This was on Unsolved Mysteries, so I'm going to play that after. What the rumor got right, though, was that the figures on the tracks were 17-year-old Kevin Ives and 16-year-old Don Henry. Arkansas medical examiner Dr. Fahmy Malik came to a questionable conclusion. His statement said at 4:25 a.m. on August 23rd, 1987, Larry Kevin Ives, 17, and Don George Henry, 16, were unconscious and in a deep sleep on the railroad tracks under the psychedelic influence of THC marijuana. What? When a train passed over them, causing their accidental death. Huh? I thought they were shot. Malik insisted the boys were still alive when the train hit them and that they had equivalent of 20 joints of marijuana in their systems. He suggested that the boys possibly smoked a lot to knock themselves out and then voluntarily lay on the tracks to commit suicide. But they were shot and tied up. It says right here, the sons were shot and tied up to the train tracks and run over. So this is not a suicide. Are you serious? He's saying that they involuntarily laid on the tracks to commit suicide. The boys' parents were very suspicious of this conclusion. I can't believe they came to a conclusion of that. Neither boy had seemed depressed, nor had they been experiencing any mental health issues. The parents set about getting a second opinion. According to Linda Ives, they attempted to get the samples collected from the scene sent to different labs. She recalls that they were met with a lot of resistance, but eventually the samples were sent to DJT Francisco in Memphis, Tennessee. The boys' parents were very disappointed to learn that Dr. Francisco had come to the same conclusion as Dr. Malik. How? Linda looked through all the lab reports with a fine-tooth comb and realized that Dr. Francisco hadn't even been sent a sample of Don's urine, only Kevin's, and yet had come to the conclusion that Don had also had high levels of THC in his system. Right, so another botched case. The parents kept questioning Francisco until he admitted he just agreed with Malik's opinion without actually testing any of the samples he was given. He said Malik had enough experience and expertise that he assumed the tests had been done correctly in the first place. That's disgusting. The Ives and the Henrys held a press conference to put pressure on the authorities to continue to look into the case, believing that the official report was completely untrue. Deputy Prosecutor Richard Garrett contacted the family and wanted to take on their case. He said he agreed that it was highly unlikely that the boys had committed suicide. On February 18, 1988, a prosecutor's hearing began. 40 experts, EMTs, and bystanders from the scene testified. Paramedics from the scene said the boys' blood was way too dark and deoxygenated to have been fresh, suggesting that they had been dead way before that train was hit on them. A friend of the boys who had briefly joined them on their hunting trip said they smoked 1 or 2 joints between them, certainly nowhere near 20. It was noted that the light green tarp the people on the train saw covering the boys was never admitted into evidence. Wow. The authorities said the tarp never actually existed and they were experiencing an optical illusion. With so much weird evidence coming up, the families decided they wanted second autopsies done on the boys. Their bodies were exhumed, and Georgia medical examiner Dr. Joseph Burton performed new autopsies. What he found in his autopsies were shockingly contradictory to Dr. Malik's initial reports. The THC in their systems was consistent with the version of events their friend had given. Maybe 1 or 2 joints had been shared between the boys, but not 20, like the doctor said. Dr. Burton also found a wound on Don's back and a tear in his shirt that was consistent with a fucking stabbing. Wow. Further, he detected an injury on Kevin's face that appeared to have been caused by a blow from the butt of a rifle that, due to swelling, had to have happened before he died. Dr. Burton suggested the verdict in the case be changed to homicide. But what had happened that night that warranted the murder of 2 young boys? Did they witness something they shouldn't have? Maybe believe that to be the case. In the 80s, Arkansas had a big drug problem. Mena, Arkansas, a couple hours drive from Bryant, was known to be a hub for trafficking. Many people suggested that the boys stumbled upon a drug drop happening in the woods that night and were murdered. Considering all the new evidence that was coming to light, a grand jury was also called to review the case. It convened on April 27th, 1998. Attorney Dan Harmon was assigned to lead the proceedings. Many people were subpoenaed to give their testimony to the jury. Some were heard, but others mysteriously disappeared, died, or were murdered before they could tell the jury what they knew. What the hell? Yeah, this guy wasn't right at all. Yeah, many people were subpoenaed to give their testimony to the jury. Some were heard, but others were mysteriously disappeared, died, or were murdered before they could tell the jury what they knew. So this is like huge. I wonder it was on Unsolved Mysteries. Keith Coney, a friend of the boys who had hung out with them in the parking lot the night they were murdered, died on a motorcycle crash. What? Keith Coney, a friend of the boys who had hung out with them that night in the parking lot the night they were murdered, died in a motorcycle crash. It was deemed an accident, but witnesses say he was being chased before the crash, and even that they thought his throat had been slashed. No autopsy was ordered. Wow. James Mellon, a witness to the meta drug trade, who claimed he had information about the murders, was found decapitated in his home. Dr. Malik ruled his death to be due to complications from an ulcer and said that the family dog had eaten his head. The head was then found a few blocks away in a trash can. This is fucked up. Greg Collins, another person claiming to have information about the murders, was found shot in the face in the woods. Malik ruled that a suicide. This son of a bitch needs to be in jail. I hope he goes to jail. Keith McCaskill claimed to be there at the tracks that night, that he knew exactly who had killed Kevin and Don. He was found in his driveway, stabbed 113 times. Similar suspicious deaths befell potential grand jury witnesses Jeff Rhodes, Booney Beardson, Richard Winters, Jordan Peatlison, and Mike Samples. They all died too. And they were the grand jury witnesses. That's like 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's like 10 deaths, if not more. Still, the grand jury went on and continued to uncover strange things. A very similar death had occurred in 1984 in the Oklahoma town just 150 miles away from Bryant. 21-year-old Billy Hainline and 26-year-old Dennis Decker were also killed on train tracks, lying side by side, not even looking up while the train barreled toward them. The case was never investigated as a homicide. The grand jury proceeded. Linda Ives became very suspicious of Dan Harmon. She alleged that he told her that Don Henry's family that he was having money troubles and that both families would cut him a check for $500 for every few weeks. Though these accusations have not been confirmed by the authorities. Rumors started circulating around town that Harmon was actually in the drug scene himself. That I believe. A few days before the grand jury was to disband, the Arkansas Democrat published that Dr. Malik's various testimonies about the case, noting one more major discrepancy. In May, he had said the boys' lungs were heavier than average because they had inhaled a lot of fluid, probably their own blood. In November, he said they were heavier than average because they had been weighed with other organs. What the fuck? This change is significant because if the first one is correct and they had inhaled blood, then the boys must have been injured before they were hit by the train. The change in testimony points toward Malik wanting to corroborate the story he came up with later. Despite everything that had gone wrong in this case and Malik's obviously suspicious moves, the Arkansas Sheriff's Association said it backed Malik and all his findings, regardless of if they turned out to be false. Wow. Malik not only kept his job, but was given a raise in a larger office. Are you like this shit pisses me off? Wow. The grand jury finished its inquest, but John Cole, the judge in the case, refused to release a report of its findings, ruling that because they had found that Bryant had a significant drug problem, the police should be following those leads and they ought not be made public. The one good thing to come from the investigation is that the official causes of death were changed to homicide. However, the new leads uncovered by the jury were barely followed up on and the case fell flat. In March 1990, Deputy Prosecutor Jean Duffy was asked to head up a new drug task force. Her supervisor, prosecuting attorney Gary Arnold, told her she wasn't to use the task force to investigate public officials. As soon as her agents began investigating, however, they were able to link several public officials, including Dan Harmon, to drug activities. She reported the information to the U.S. Attorney's Office anyway. Articles began coming out accusing Jean of embezzlement. Wow. Illegal arrest, and child endangerment. She was soon served a subpoena to appear at a hearing that would force her to reveal her sources. She ignored the subpoena and fled the state instead. A felony arrest warrant was issued for what would normally be a misdemeanor. Jean said she thought she would be jailed if she showed up for the hearing and feared for her life if she were put into an Arkansas jail after learning what she knew about the officials in the area. She was almost certain the smear campaign and subpoena were the work of Dan Harmon, though, once again, authorities have not confirmed that Harmon had anything to do with them. In 1992, an LA Times article came out detailing all of Dr. Malik's suspicious rulings, including saying a man who was shot in the chest 5 times had committed suicide. Damn. It is insane. The public wanted him removed as the state medical examiner. Governor Bill Clinton refused to remove him from his office. Malik not only wasn't removed from the office, but he was also once again given a massive raise. I'm pissed. This is so fucked up. Wow. A new detective, John Brown, was assigned to the boys' case. He was told by higher-ups to leave it alone and not investigate any further. Wow. He didn't listen. He found the file to be lacking a ton of significant information, such as evidence lists. He began re-interviewing witnesses and examining statements. By November 1996, Dan Harmon, had become Saline Country prosecutor. Oh my God. He was driven out of an office after he assaulted and kidnapped a reporter. What the fuck? Harmon was further looked into, and more accusations against him started coming to light. A grand jury was convened in April 1997, which eventually charged Harmon with racketeering, extortion, and distribution. The rumors were true. Dan Harmon was part of the Arkansas drug trade, so they all protected him, even Clinton. Every case he had ever touched was suddenly considered to be tainted, including that of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. In 2018, the case got slightly stranger. A former pro wrestler, Billy Haynes, contacted Linda Ives saying he knew I'd killed the boys. He said he had worked as muscle for the Arkansas drug trade and had been asked by a criminal politician to make sure all the money from a drug drop made it to where it was supposed to go. He said the boys were murdered by people working for the same criminal politician. Despite the corruption uncovered in relation to the majority of the important people in this case, no definitive verdict has ever been reached about the deaths of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. You know this one? Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah, Billy Haynes. Okay, we're gonna watch something on it real quick. You know this one? Okay, let's watch this is Unsolved Mysteries.
Boys had been lying across this stretch of track.
It's been over 30 years since two teenage boys were found dead on these tracks in Saline County. The tracks are still here, and so is the mystery regarding what happened. What's new is the witnesses come forward.
I witnessed everything that happened.
He has nothing to gain and everything to lose.
I think he's telling 100% truth.
The new witness speaks out for the very first time what he saw that tragic night, Thursday at 10 on Channel 7 News.
So for anyone who hasn't heard of this case, I think it's almost definitely going to require at least 2 episodes to completely wrap it up. But really, I would prefer to do 5 or 6 shorter 10-minute videos, so that way we can cover other topics in between. I mean, there's just so much available information out there, and new details about it are coming out even to this day. We'll go through the basics of the story here in this first video, and if anyone is interested in seeing more about it, we'll dive into the gritty details with the next one. So, on August 23rd, 1987, the bodies of 16-year-old Don Henry and 7
The two boys had been lying across this stretch of track.
It's been over 30 years since two teenage
about this story as the sophisticated. If you unintentionally well, but you could easily James Millam.
Sorry, I thought it was the Unsolved Mysteries. I'm gonna look for Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, he should have. All of them should. Do you see how many people they fucking killed? All because of drugs. Yeah, I'm this one I'm pissed. This is disgusting. Is this it? Can't even hear anything.
Emergency call to the police.
I'm just seeing if this is the right episode.
Christmas miracle. Join me. Police call. It'll be a miracle. Supposed to be on 10 years. A day 7-year-old.
What was the traffic?
All sewage. Neil's brother's house just down the hall. 2:30.
Yeah, seen it. Shit. I swear I have to watch it. This one.
Was found literally decapitated.
Day 10.
Usually, I would prefer to do 5 or 6 shorter 10-minute videos, so that way we can cover other topics in between. I mean, there's just so much available information out there, and new details about it are coming out even to this day. We'll go through the basics of the story here in this first video, and if anyone is interested in seeing more about it, we'll dive into the gritty details. So, on August 23rd, 1987, the bodies of 16-year-old Don Henry and 17-year-old Kevin Ives were run over by a cargo train in Alexander, Arkansas, as they lay on the tracks. They were out hunting at night, and although their deaths were first classed as an accident, later evidence determined that they had in fact been murdered before being carefully placed on the tracks. It's important to point out that virtually nobody believed this accidental death ruling. The medical examiner claimed that the boy...
When I mute, is there still an echo?
had smoked so many, quote, marijuana cigarettes that they were essentially passed out and decided to lay perfectly parallel to each other, directly on top of the tracks, and that they were so high that they somehow couldn't hear the hundreds of tons of cargo and steel screeching towards them or even the train's whistle. Yeah, I know, it's complete nonsense. We'll talk about this medical bit. This dude is completely out of his mind, or worse, he was intentionally covering up the facts. The one detail that becomes apparent almost immediately about this story is that the murder was likely covered up. For anyone who doesn't know what was going on in Arkansas during the 1980s, especially in this area, there was a massive drug running operation taking place.
Do you know about anything with Bill Clinton on it? Because he was involved too, it seems.
Said to be tied to some high-level politicians and covert entities. And one of the most explanations for the cover-up is that Don and Kevin may have stumbled upon one of these drug drops and therefore had to be silenced. For one thing, the entire investigation was botched from the very beginning, and it really starts to look like both the local and federal government was likely involved in this poorly handled investigation. And as many would suggest, quite possibly intentionally. So, these drug drops were very sophisticated. It was a system of small planes that would fly low over a predetermined drop site and then let the cargo loose, attached to a parachute and a box-like structure that would automatically open upon impact. So then the drugs could be quickly collected by any perpetrators, and then they could almost immediately leave the scene right afterwards. You don't have to fool with it, just pick it up, you're gone. Also, strangely enough, elements of this story are likely tied to the octopus through the Iran-Contra scandal. There's even a major blockbuster movie starring Tom Cruise that mostly whitewashes the story, but it does show some pieces of the truth, including the main pilot smuggler, Barry Seal, being caught by the authorities and arrested, but then being let go scot.
That's another one. If you want to take a look at that one, Rev.
Free by the state governor, who was at the time, of course, Bill Clinton. So you see, if these young men really did just so happen to unintentionally walk upon such a high-level and clearly illegal government operation that would not only cause massive embarrassment for the government, but also jeopardize the funding element of a much, much larger illegal operation of supplying weapons to Iran and support for the Contras in Nicaragua, there is little doubt that the players of such a massive clandestine project would murder 2 witnesses in order to keep these largely CIA activities secret. If anyone isn't familiar with the Iran-Contra affair or the octopus, we might do an entire series on that as well, but you could easily make a type of horrible accident. But the additional details really point to a strong possibility that they were complicit in an agenda. For example, not disclosing the fact that the boys were covered in a green tarp as they lay on the tracks before they were hit by the train, which was seen by the train operator, who had a clear view of the boys and the tarp before he engaged the brakes. They simply claimed that there was no tarp, and in fact, they did such a terrible job on the investigation that Kevin's foot was actually left behind at the scene for 2 full days before it was finally recovered. And while we're on the subject of the botched police work, let's take a look at that medical examiner I mentioned earlier. This guy's name is Fahmy Malik, and I can't understand how he was able to keep his job after some of this. I mean, just listen to some of these other forensic conclusions that he came to during his joke of a career. In one case, a man named Raymond Albright had been shot in the chest 4 times with a .45 caliber handgun. And what was Fahmy Malik's ruling? That it was a suicide. Sadly, I'm not joking. In another case, a man named James Millam was found literally decapitated. His head was nowhere to be found, and Malik ruled that his death was caused by an ulcer and that the man's head was missing because his dog had eaten the entire thing, including the skull, which is, of course, ridiculous enough already. But on top of that, the man's head was found not too long after. So, not surprisingly, in the case of Don and Kevin, a separate autopsy was ordered, which was eventually performed by Dr. Joseph Burton, and he ruled that Don had been stabbed to death and Kevin had his face and head crushed with a rifle butt before they were placed on the tracks. I'm going to play a short clip from the documentary Obstruction of Justice, which I actually found on a YouTube channel called Carnage of Ice, who has an incredible video on the subject, and where I actually sourced a lot of the research for this video. I very strongly recommend that everybody watch them both. There's links at the top of the description.
17-year-old Kevin Ives and 16-year-old Don Henry were struck by a train near Alexander. The medical examiner has said that the boys were asleep and drugged with marijuana. The parents, however, disputed that claim and persuaded authorities to reopen the case.
Because of their persistence, Kevin and Don's bodies were exhumed. New autopsies were performed.
If I can find anything in Unsolved Mysteries, I will show you guys. I'm looking, I can't find anything.
And a grand jury was convened. Dr. a nationally recognized pathologist from out of state, performed the new autopsies. His findings revealed that Don Henry had been stabbed in the back, and Kevin Ives' face had been smashed by a blow from a rifle butt before their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks.
This information alone would strongly suggest that the boys were injured.
In so many different directions that it was impossible to tell where the original skull fractures were. Malik also had completely dismantled Kevin's jawbones. Burton stated he had performed thousands of autopsies and had never seen anything like it. Was Malik trying to hide something?
Was there a stab? The answer is no, they were not stabbed. Were they dead beforehand? Absolutely no, they were alive.
A former employee at the crime lab said he discovered what appeared to be evidence of a stab wound during the original autopsy, but was told, quote, not to worry about it. Malik has refused all comment.
The deaths of these two boys most probably were not accidental deaths, but that they met their death as a result of injuries inflicted on them by other people. Person.
In addition to Burton, 2 others. It was their collective opinion that the ruling be changed to murder.
During the midst of all of the turmoil with trying to get the ruling changed in our case, it became very apparent that this was not an isolated instance of an error in the ruling on the manner of death. There were
ruled incorrect. One case involved the murder of Raymond Albright, who had been shot 5 times in the chest with a Colt .45.
I apologize about the quality. It's not me and it's not him. It's old.
Incredibly, Malik had ruled suicide. Another involved James Dewey Milam, whose body was found without the head. In this case, Malik ruled the cause of death to be an ulcer. Although Milam's head had been clearly severed with a knife, Malik claimed the family pooch had bitten off the head, eaten the entire thing, and then regurgitated. Malik says he tested the dog's vomit and found traces of Milam's brain and skull. Unfortunately for Dr. Malik, Milam's head was later found. Malik, it turns out, had made up the entire story. Media coverage of Malik's...
And just think, they gave this Dr. Malik 2 fucking raises and a big... Wow.
dishonest rulings resulted in a massive public outcry, calling for his removal from office.
The medical examiner comes up and he has fabrication where he has created his own evidence.
This is of a magnitude it could create a national scandal, and if necessary, it will.
I have work
I have
work to do.
Excuse me. And you can say that you are
lying on his autopsy cases, lying in court. And he's not an honest person. He should be prosecuted.
Nevertheless, both Governor Clinton and the Arkansas State Medical Examiner Commission Chairman, Jocelyn Elders, who had the power to remove Malik from office, not only insisted he remain, they gave him a raise.
Based on the facts I have, I really
Wonder how much money they got paid for this shit. That's disgusting. That's like 10 plus people that were murdered because of a drug drop that 2 boys witnessed.
feel that Arkansas owes Dr. Malik a great debt and a real apology.
Today, the governor was asked if Malik should resign.
I don't think that's a decision that I should make based on what I now know.
And in 40 days, despite flat out fabricating evidence and his constant. Tragically, not uncommon for stories like this, multiple other witnesses and informants who claim to have direct knowledge about the boy's murder, they ended up later dying under unusually suspicious circumstances as well, almost all of which are still unsolved. So let me know if you guys are interested in looking deeper into this. I have actually been following this case for about 10 years, ever since I saw the Unsolved Mysteries episode about it. But before you decide if you want to see more, please make sure you check out the Carnage on Ice video. I have no problem going down another rabbit.
Okay, so that's about it for that one. I'm gonna look for the Unsolved Mysteries part on it. Usually I can find it, but no, I'm having a hard time for this one. It's just weird. I'll show you what I see. Like there's a bunch of shows on here. Like this one's Billy Jack Haynes on the Boys on the Track's desk. And this is the Hannibal TV. There's that one. I sent this one. I've not seen it. I looked. Nope. Nope. What if I just put choose? Right.
New Belgian style waffles. Oh, so delicious.
Why is it always about food? All right, I'm just gonna check real quick.
This program is about
A man forced open the rear doorway of a commercial airline. Buffeted by winds gusting. All right, that's 2. Where's the 27 would have to refuel. No one can be certain that DB Cooper flew along this path on his way to a large white object had been reported floating in the field that Cooper could not have survived on that rugged terrain.
Aliens.
Some believe that Pennsylvania House.
Oh, is it? It's it. Finally, I found it.
So far, the run had been the background. A train.
Damn. I mean, full on Cheech and Chong car made of wheat on fire type of. Yeah, like I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. Oh, I'm getting so many messages now, which is fine because I'm about to wrap this up. Would it be DUI? Mangoes, right? Yeah, like I've never heard of anybody being comatose because of weed ever in my life. I mean, exactly. Look at Cheech and Chong. Look at Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles. I know their shows, but trust me, they smoke it. They've even admitted it on their show. All right, I should go, guys. Thanks for joining me. I'm sure I'll go live again tomorrow. It was fun. Plus, my kid's playing his electric guitar and music, so I'm gonna get like copyright claims for it. Driving under the influence instead of driving on the top. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I'm sure I'll be back tomorrow. I have some more stories to read. All right. You guys have a good night.
I know you told your friend you're not okay. And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray.